Live from the TV30 studio, here is Jim Schneider.
Well, hi, and welcome to the inFocus program. We're glad that you've joined us for the broadcast here this evening. We'd like to mention that due to our subject matter and needing to facilitate this interview, this program is being pre-recorded, and we trust you'll be able to stay with us for the hour. We have lots of information we'll be passing on. However, our phone lines will not be open for the broadcast here today. Thank you for joining us. Friends, it was on June 24th of 2022 that the U.S. Supreme Court released their decision in Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health. It's a decision that we were told would have the potential of overturning Roe v. Wade, and indeed it did just that. But if you thought that the battle for life was over, friends, you're sadly mistaken, because it is only intensifying across our nation as well as in individual states, including matters unfolding right here in our own state. Some states are doing all they can to protect life. Others are just opening the floodgates, allowing for individuals to kill the innocent preborn life of a child all the way up right to the moment of birth. And others are becoming sanctuary states, allowing minors to come from other states to come and abort their child. We know that our law here in the state of Wisconsin, our 1849 law, which our founders had great wisdom in protecting human life, is certainly under the it's in the target range right now. It's certainly up for being challenged. Matter of fact, this very week we see that oral arguments are going to unfold that would dismantle our pro-life law here in the state of Wisconsin. And how ironic, because May 2nd of this year and every year is National Baby Day. And it's so ironic to know that in a week that we're celebrating babies, that we actually have a court that is hearing oral arguments and an attorney general and a governor that's working to dismantle our protections for that innocent baby. Joining us here on the inFocus program, we welcome Dr. Tara Sander-Lee, Vice President and Director of Life Sciences at the Charlotte-Luzerne Institute. They're a research organization focused on science and statistics for life. She has over 20 years of experience in academic and clinical medicine with an emphasis on the cause of pediatric disease. She has a PhD in biochemistry from the Medical College of Wisconsin, followed by postdoctoral training at Harvard Medical School and Boston Children's Hospital, an appointed faculty member at the Medical College of Wisconsin, where she did direct a research lab investigating congenital heart disease in children, served then as the scientific director of molecular diagnostics at Children's. She's currently a member of the U.S. Secretary of Health and Human Services Advisory Committee on Infant and Maternal Mortality, has dedicated to promoting some ethical advances in healthcare that protect the sanctity of human life. She's also published in various medical journals and textbooks, a contributor to the book Choose Life, Answering Key Claims of Abortion Defenders with Compassion, and her chapter Knit Together in the Mother's Womb, A Biology of Prenatal Development, also lead editor of voyageoflife.com. So good to have you with us here tonight, Doctor.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really a pleasure.
So take us back to June 24th, 2022, when the Supreme Court decision came out on the Dobbs decision. What was your reaction?
It was one of extreme gratefulness that the Lord had answered prayers for many years. And there was it was so much just joy that day that prayer, those prayers had been answered, that the court realized that it was not constitutional, that these unborn children had a right to life, and that this decision needed to go back to the states. And so there was incredible relief and joy, but we didn't have much time to really celebrate. Right. We immediately hit the ground running, because then the battles really began at the state level. It's like, as you mentioned, then every state then started to either put up roadblocks, to say, no way, we're going to still continue to allow abortion up until the point of birth. But then we have other states that are standing firm and saying, no, we are going to respect the right to the unborn's life, and we're going to put limitations on abortion in our state.
With all the advancements that we have going on in science today, and with all the pleas that we've heard from government officials to follow the science, we hear that over and over on so many issues. It seems like there's a concerted effort not to follow the science as it relates to the development of an unborn child.
There is. And so the science is absolutely clear. And science confirms Scripture. Scripture says that we are fearfully and wonderfully made, The Lord created us inside the womb. He told Jeremiah, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. And what we know now from science, I mean, 50 years ago, maybe they had an excuse. You could barely see the unborn child in the womb. But now we have unprecedented ability to see the unborn child with clarity inside the womb. We have 3D and 4D ultrasound. We can not only see the unborn child with its fully formed fingers and toes and beating heart, just by 6 weeks. We can see the behaviors, the child sucking his or her thumb. And so there's so much more that we know about the child now. And yes, even though we all that science is absolutely clear from the moment of conception, that is undeniable that it is a human being from the moment of conception all the way through until birth.
Matter of fact, you're the lead editor at voyageoflife.com, and just shows the remarkable journey of life, starting from conception all the way to birth. And we're just going to take our viewers on that video journey. We'll watch that and have you come back and comment on it.
Excellent.
Let's go to that video. It's a remarkable journey.
Yes, it is. I mean, it's just we use that medical artwork that is scientifically accurate to show that from the moment of conception, when the sperm fertilizes the egg, when the sperm and the egg fuse together to form that zygote. Yes, it's just one cell, but that is a living organism. That you have half the amount of DNA from the mom, half the amount of DNA from the father. When they come together, they form a unique human being, DNA like any other. And then, as you can see, within a very short period of time, that just by the 6th week gestation, that's just 22 to 23 days after fertilization, that baby already has a beating heart. And we know that with that time, the brain is developing. I mean, we know that by the end of that embryonic time period, that's just 10 weeks, that baby already has over 90% of its bodily structures. So as an adult, it's predicted that a person has 4,500 body structures. By that stage at 10 weeks, already has 4,000. Right. So full fingers and toes and arms and legs. And like I said, we already know by that stage whether the baby is going to be left or right-handed. It's incredible. Fingerprints are starting to form by 12 weeks and are fully formed by 19. We know that pain, we know that you can't see that in that video, but what we do know from a biochemical perspective is that the receptors, the pain receptors, are already starting to form very early on, as early as 7 weeks, and that by as early as possibly 12 weeks, definitely by 15 weeks, that baby can feel pain. We know that that the sensory systems, as you can see, that by that 10 weeks, there were ears, there were eyes, so that baby is starting to already develop the ability to hear and to touch and to see. And so it's anybody that says that baby is not a human being is just absolutely denying science, because and this isn't just a pro-life perspective. The textbooks, this is decades of discovery have proved that this is a living human being from the moment of conception. So.
And again, we're hearing that mantra all the time.
Yes.
Climate change and everything else. Follow the science, but we neglect the science, really, of what's happening inside the womb.
Well, and I think the only, it's so clear why they do that, though, is because if you can deny that is a real human being, it's the only way that you can really justify what you're advocating for. They're advocating for killing these unborn, innocent human lives at any stage, and it's just, and the only way that they can really advocate for that is to try to convince people that it's not a real human being. And
you mentioned the heart beating by 6 weeks, and this is a time before most women even know that they're expecting a child, or near that time.
Right, and the heartbeat, and not only is the heartbeat just starting at 6 weeks, we know that by the end of that that week, by the end of the 6th week, it's beating rhythmically at 110 beats per minute. By the end of that week, it will have already beat 1 million times. And before that baby is born, that same heart will have beaten 54 million times. And so, some people will say, well, it's not a fully formed 4-chambered heart yet, okay? And then I remind people that human development is a growth continuum, right? The human brain does not fully develop until 25 years after birth, right? So do we say that somehow that, a toddler or a teenager is not a real human being because their brain isn't fully formed? No. I mean, it's like we are all on a growth continuum. And so to say that somehow the ability for us to be human, our intrinsic worth or value, is based on our form and function just absolutely makes no sense.
I also just came across this recently from lifenews.com of the 3D images showing unborn babies reacting to flavors of food eaten by the mother and different reactions that we're seeing from the baby in regard to that.
Yeah, taste receptors are actually already in place. We know that by 15 weeks that baby is already going to have a preference. That baby is, if a mother eats a cookie versus something bitter, we know that baby can tell the difference and that they're going to actually be tasting and drinking more amniotic fluid once the mother has a cookie. So yeah, these sensory systems and behaviors are fully in place.
Many may not realize this, but April 17th, President Biden's Department of Health and Human Services just put forth a proposed rulemaking to put forth a rule across our nation to redefine the term person, a human being or child or individual, but to not include a fertilized egg, an embryo, or a fetus. We're taking us into some dangerous territory here.
We're taking us into some really dangerous territory because that ignores science. Because what they're ignoring is the fact that fetal surgery is one of the biggest advancements that we've seen in science in the last few decades. So fetal surgery involves going inside the womb and performing surgery on that baby in the womb, the unborn child, sometimes as early as 15 weeks, and repairing defects such as spina bifida or twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome. And what they do is that baby is recognized as a separate patient from the mother. They use separate anesthesia to treat that baby. That baby is seen as a completely separate entity from the mother and is treated as such. So what they're proposing absolutely makes no sense. And then the other thing is that a person is not defined by their form or their function or their ability. If that were the case, then we would know that the elderly or even an infant, right? An infant is dependent on a lot of people to survive, right? Children with certain disabilities, toddlers, we are all in some respects dependent on another. And so that is not how we determine personhood. So they're absolutely just ignoring science and the facts of life.
Tuesday, May 2nd, National Baby Day. Just learned that recently, a day to celebrate babies, to highlight baby experiences growing up. And I thought, how tragic. Here we have National Baby Day taking place in the very week that we have, directed by our governor's office and attorney general's office, a means to dismantle our life protection law here in the state of Wisconsin, in that we are seeing the oral arguments that will be unfolding this week to allow the killing of the preborn baby.
Yeah, I mean, before Dobbs came down, we know that in Wisconsin that there were over 6,000 abortions that were taking place. And so after Dobbs, now, as you said, that 1849 law now is put a ban on abortion. I want to point out, though, that there is the exception for the life of a mother, okay, in which you might have to separate the baby from the mother. You don't need to brutally rip that baby apart. You might have to separate the baby from the mother. But yes, if there is a lot at stake here. I mean, we are literally looking at the lives of thousands of babies are potentially at stake if they look to overturn this law or modify it in any way. Because we know that even if they would say, okay, well, maybe let's reach a consensus at 6 weeks or at 12 weeks, that still means that thousands of babies are going to die if we allow abortion in the state, even at an arbitrary point. That is a human being from the moment of conception. And we know that most of the abortions, based on data that the Charlotte Lozier has analyzed of abortion data in the state of Wisconsin, we know that the majority of abortions, 88% of them, occur before 8 weeks. So we know that at any stage that they said, that still means that lives are on the line and they're going to be lost.
So really the consensus we should come to is that let's let's go ahead and have a consensus that life begins at conception.
I think we have to absolutely we have to follow the science, and we know that what science says is that the human being forms at the moment of conception, when a sperm and an egg fuse. And that is when a human being. And so if we are going to protect human life, I'm not going to advocate for the law, but I can tell you the science, and I can tell you that a human life is going to be protected. A human life begins at the moment of conception.
Sure, and so we have right now a very strong law protecting the unborn child.
That's right.
Here across the state of Wisconsin.
And not only protecting the lives of unborn children, but protecting the health of mothers. We know that abortion, there are 2 victims in every abortion. A child, the goal of an abortion is to deliver a dead baby. And not only that, there are incredible harms to women when they undergo abortion. We know that not only are there physical and potential serious complications when a mother undergoes an abortion, whether it be surgical or chemical, but we also know that there are studies that show that there is a risk of severe mental health disorders following, increased risk of suicide, increased risk of depression and anxiety. So not only is this, protecting the unborn lives, we are also protecting the health of these mothers.
We have heard so many testimonies from women who had an abortion early in life who regret it day by day. They do not forget. They do not forget what they went through, the procedures that they undertook, the loss of life. They don't have the experiences of going through those milestones, but yet they'll say, my child would have been this age today. Those emotional scars are huge.
They are, and we shouldn't have to choose between one or the other. We should be able to, as a state, help both. These are 2 individual human beings. We should be able to protect the child and help the mother.
Yeah.
There's no reason why we can't help both. We shouldn't have to choose one over the other.
Well, the oral arguments get underway this week in the courts, in the lower courts, and likely are going to work themselves up to the Wisconsin Supreme Court. It is highly likely that it will not be the present Supreme Court, but the incoming Supreme Court Justice, Janet Protasiewicz, that is going to be rendering her decision. All of her campaign ads getting up to this previous election, without a shadow of a doubt, indicated where she stood on this issue.
Yeah.
Elections do have consequences.
They do, and I mean, she's made it very clear that she supports increased access to abortion, and so I think it will have to watch and see what happens. But I would highly encourage people to remember that these are human lives at stake. These are human lives with beating hearts just by 22 days after fertilization that feel pain, and that every time when decisions are being made, when votes are being cast, remember that is going to significantly impact thousands of lives in this state if they look to overturn the law. And if they look to uphold the law, we're talking the protection of thousands of lives.
So really, there's a lot at stake.
There's a lot at stake.
My. The other aspect is that we are seeing this court case come forth. If that court case is overturned, I mean, if they're saying that the 1849 law is not accepted, what happens to us here in the state of Wisconsin?
So my understanding that if they overturn the law, then I think they're in a position where they can try to reach a consensus to like other states have, to say, okay, well, where do we draw the line? It's an arbitrary line. Do we say that we are going to protect children at 6 weeks, at 12 weeks, or are we going to, allow abortion for any reason up until the point of birth? So there's going to be a lot of decisions that are going to be at stake, and it's going to be really interesting to see where we fall. And
there's great disagreements in the legal community right now, too, whether we go back to other enacted legislation or if that is void as well. But the lives of the preborn are going to be greatly impacted by this.
They are. And you can see that, like in other states, they're reaching consensus at different lines, and it's a real battle within the state. And so it's really important for people to understand just the reality that these are human beings. These are human beings from the moment of conception, and that their lives are at stake. in this election.
Friends, you're watching inFocus, and we would encourage you to be praying for these court cases as they're going on, oral arguments getting underway later this week. I believe they're starting on Thursday, and it's just appalling to me that they've been doing these moot court scenarios and having practice sessions to practice, speaking about the right to take the life of another human being, and that's going on. But be praying for the judges, be praying for the courts, be praying for those that are arguing to support life. Friends, we know that this is a troublesome time for our state, it's a troublesome time for our nation, but we need to advance life. Scripture says to choose life. We have been knit together in our mother's womb. We'll be talking more about that here as well. I've got before me here a updated report from Planned Parenthood. Mm-hmm. It is their annual report for 2021-2022, and it's called Relentless. And they go through here, and one of the things to be pointing out in this report is that in their annual report, they indicate that they have conducted 370, that's in the last year, 374,155 abortions. Mm-hmm. Every one of those representing a human life.
Yeah. And I think it's important because we've analyzed, the report, the new report came out. We looked really carefully at the older report, and the numbers, as you said, are greater, or maybe the number of abortions maybe went down a little bit, but they're still enormous. I mean, mm-hmm. 371, over 371,000 abortions. And I think, this fits with what we see in the past, that abortions make up the majority of the services that they provide. That's just the reality. I mean, when we look at the report and the analysis of our report from before, we see that their abortions made up over 96% of their services, whereas prenatal services, miscarriage care, and adoption referrals, these non-abortion services, only accounted for less than 4% total. And so for every adoption referral, Planned Parenthood performed almost 200 abortions. Right. And so the goal of Planned Parenthood exists to provide abortion care and to kill the lives of innocent unborn children. That's just, the data is absolutely clear.
And what's also very alarming is that it's reported that in taxpayer dollars, over $670 mm-hmm. million yes. going into the coffers of Planned Parenthood.
Yeah, and I mean, so we know from our report too, and again, that number is even more, we saw from the 2020 to 2021 report that they had $1.7 billion in income and over $2.1 billion in net assets. And that was at a time when they were receiving, $633 million in taxpayer funding. So mm-hmm. now they're receiving even more. So the amount of money that they are using of taxpayer dollars to kill the innocent unborn is unbelievable.
Another staggering aspect from this report itself is the capitalizing on the transgender industry at the same time. Mm-hmm. We're finding that offering the puberty blockers, mm-hmm. Cross-sex hormones to young adults and to minors, and parents don't need to know that you've been into Planned Parenthood. There mm-hmm. really is a arming of young people against their own parents, and really breaking down family relationships that should really be accelerated at this time.
Mm-hmm. And we see that with abortion too, because they try to, when it comes to abortion, there's definitely a push to not involve the parents, right? Mm-hmm. To allow even these minors to make their own decisions outside of the parents even knowing about that. So it's.
I'd like you to respond to some of the mantras that we're hearing today, one of which is, my body, my choice. A woman should have control over her own body. Bands off our body. Our bodies, our abortions.
When I hear those same mantras, there's so many thoughts that come to my mind. Scientifically, I think that just absolutely, that argument doesn't hold. Mm-hmm. Because we know, as I mentioned earlier, that these are two completely separate human beings at the molecular level, DNA. They have two completely different beating hearts. We know from fetal surgery, even when they receive anesthesia, they are two separate patients mm-hmm. that are treated individually. So scientifically, that argument doesn't hold. We know spiritually, what Scripture says, that God created these human beings, and that we are not our own. God created all of us. We are separate human beings that He created for a purpose, and we are His children. Mm-hmm. So to be able to say, my body, my choice, that's just not
different blood types.
different blood types. We also know that the child is not a part of a woman's body, right? The baby is not like an arm or a leg. This is a separate individual human organism that is developing completely separate from the mother. And I think, we had talked earlier too about there's the dependence on the mother. I mean, that womb is the safest place for the baby to be. But so an infant is also going to be dependent upon that mother after birth. And so we know that as parents, there's this natural and legal obligation to care for our children. And that doesn't just immediately start, at the moment of birth. That is a privilege to be able to care for that child during pregnancy and to not kill that child. I mean, it just goes against every natural instinct of a mother. And I think, what message does that send to men, right? If we say, my body, my choice, that basically says to the father that, well, that's not my problem. That's not my problem. And that is... We need men to be involved. We need men to take responsibility and to help to support that mother, not to just stand by and say, well, it's her decision, it's her problem, and I don't have any part to do with this. And I think we have to constantly remind people that this is an innocent human life with a beating heart that has been a human being ever since the moment of conception, that was created for a purpose. God, there is, she might have that pregnancy might be unexpected for her, but that was not unexpected for God. God wouldn't have allowed it if it wasn't for a purpose. And so if we interrupt that divine plan, there's going to be harm. There's going to be harm that's done. It's going to kill that child, and it's going to hurt the mother.
Dr. Tara Sander-Lee with us here tonight from the Charlotte Luzer Institute. And friends, we're talking about this all-important topic of life and being a defender of life. This very week, we are going to have oral arguments that begin to dismantle our abortion law here in the state of Wisconsin that protects the innocent preborn babies. Doctor, we also hear abortion is health care. How do you respond to that as a medical doctor? Abortion is health care.
If abortion is healthcare, what disease are you treating? That was a question posed by my colleague, Dr. Rubenhorst, who actually testified at a hearing last week. And I think that it's such an important question because I think the abortion industry, and I think we're going to get into the whole chemical abortion, but a lot of times they twist and turn the words in order to say that actually pregnancy is an illness. Because if you can say that pregnancy is like an illness, then it's basically, then your abortion is treating that illness. Yeah. But we know that pregnancy is not an illness. Pregnancy is a very natural human function that mothers, that it's a privilege that, to experience pregnancy and to bring, to have new life. And so it absolutely makes no sense because abortion is not treating any disease. And if anything, it kills a child and it harms a mother.
We've got that video clip of Dr. Monique Bubenhorst we're going to play here at this time. And she is a renowned medical professional, also researched the issue and was asked some very pointed questions. This was at a U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee hearing, and you can hear her testimony as she spoke just a week ago.
My name is Dr. Monique Bubenhorst. I am a practicing board-certified OBGYN with more than 30 years' experience in patient care, teaching, research, health policy, and global health. I'd like to begin by noting that the Dobbs decision presents an opportunity to mitigate abortion's many harms to women, unborn children, families, and community. Abortion not only poses risks to the mother, it is also, by definition, always lethal to an embryo or fetus, an unborn child who is a human being, a member of the human family. Not a clump of cells or a potential child, but a child assuming the human form. Abortion's goal is to kill that human being. It neither treats, palliates, or prevents any disease and is therefore not health care. This is reinforced by the fact that the majority of OBGYNs do not perform abortions. Studies show that the percentage that do is declining and has been for decades, from a high of 40% in 1985 to between 7 and 24% at present. Given this, abortion cannot be considered essential health care for women, and if abortion is health care, my question is, what disease are you treating?
Well said. I mean, this is not a potential human being.
Right. It's not a potential human being. This is a human being. And I think her point also that that nearly 90% of OBGYNs do not perform abortions. And I think that people need to understand, because when they say, well, we need it, it's health care. It's the only thing, we have to allow this so that we can treat women the way that we need to. But I think people need to understand that 95% of the abortions in the United States are for elective reasons. I think the numbers are, when we start looking at like the number where we actually need to intervene for the life of the mother, those numbers are incredibly low. I think it's only like 1% of the cases. So the majority are for elective reasons. That family, that mother just is facing an unexpected pregnancy and does not want that child.
Does rape change the facts? Rape or incest change the facts on innocent human life?
No. I mean, the fact is that is still a human being. The fact that rape and incest are horrible, evil sins. But to then say that we're going to punish the child and kill the child for that horrible act, that just reaps more harm against harm that's been already done. That is not the solution to a problem. And we don't know what God's plan is for that child. But to all of a sudden, intervene and say, well, no, now we need to kill that child in the process. That's just one more harm on top of another.
I'd like to play another video clip, and this is a Dr. John Bruchowski, who aborted preborn babies as a young medical doctor, and then as a practicing OBGYN realized this is an unborn baby, and abortion, he is saying, is never good. He is also saying it's not medically necessary. This is an interview he had with Lila Rose of Live Action. Here's what he had to say, and we'll have you comment on it.
You're making the point, ultimately, that abortion, the direct intentional ending of a life of a child, is never medically necessary. That you may have to target the disease, as you say, maybe there's there's an infection, and you might have to do an early delivery of the placentas, and that might mean an early delivery of the child, and there's no way around it. But you're trying to care for that child and trying to give that child a chance.
Because from a physical and a mental and a spiritual point of view, you never pit mom against her baby, ever. Because she's the one that's got to live with herself and her actions, and her doctor. Oh no, he recommended it. I needed to do it. I understand. Because once again, I can't throw stones. My heart breaks when I hear that suffering.
It's really troubling, what he had to say as he recognized at one point that he was participating in abortion and recognized this indeed is a human being.
Yeah.
And it's not medically necessary.
It isn't. And I think in those very rare circumstances where the mother's life is at danger, there are protocols where you can separate the baby from the mother and try to save both. There's never where you need to kill one in order to try to save. You try to save both.
Two separate patients.
Two separate patients, that's exactly right. And there's never going to be the situation where you need to deliberately and intentionally go in and kill that child, crush the baby's brain, tear that baby limb from limb in order to save that mother's life. You might need to separate the two. But like you said, the goal is always to try to help both. No different here in the state of Wisconsin as we face, whether we're going to uphold the law or not. We can try to help both. We can help both, and then try to save both if there is ever an emergency, that's required.
Deal with the topic of ectopic pregnancies as well.
So ectopic pregnancies is which the baby does not implant inside the uterus. Basically the pregnancy is occurring outside of the uterus, sometimes in the fallopian tube, and so that can be an incredibly dangerous situation to the mother, because as the baby grows, then that fallopian tube could rupture, and then she'll be in crisis and bleed to death. She needs immediate emergent care. But that's different from abortion, where abortion is the intentional destruction of an unborn child. An ectopic pregnancy, that baby is not going to survive in the fallopian tube. It's just not. So it's very different. It's a very different medical procedure from abortion. And I think it's important to understand that, as I mentioned earlier, over 90% of OBGYNs do not perform abortions, the intentional destruction and killing of an unborn child. And pro-life OBGYNs for years have been helping women manage ectopic pregnancies. Very different. It's very different from abortion.
Doctor, this past Friday, April 28th, the famous, I should say infamous, late-term abortion doctor Leroy Carhart died. It's reported that he was responsible for the deaths of over 30,000 innocent babies. He practiced late-term abortions in particular. There had been undercover video released of him, which he was talking about the late-term abortion process, in which women would be carrying a dead baby for 3 days. And he said during this time, well, the baby, he didn't use the term baby, but it gets soft and mushy, like putting meat in a crock pot, then said in a slow cooker. Really is, barbaric.
Yeah, it's absolutely barbaric. I mean, it reminds me of like Kermit Gosnell, you know, and these late-term abortionists that they were so blinded by the fact that these were innocent human beings, and then performing these late-term abortions. Yeah. Just, it's the intentional destruction of these babies at any stage is horrific. But when you look at late stage, and there's no doubt at that stage.
I thought of the horrible reckoning that stands before him entering into eternity, and how tragic. I'd like to move to the abortion pill, because that has very much been in the news a lot. We have conflicting rulings that are happening in different levels of court and appeals courts and so forth. And the U.S. Supreme Court was just asked as well to intervene with this, and they just had a 7-2 ruling that allowed the continued use of the pill to go unfettered as it works its way through the court system. So let's talk about the abortion pill, mifepristone, what it is, how it works, etc.
Yeah, so this is a really important discussion. So the abortion pill, also known as RU46 or Mifeprex, this now accounts for over 60% of all abortions. Abortion pill or chemical abortion is very dangerous. You are going to hear from those that advocate that we should have this available, easy access, that it's, it's great. What they say is chemical abortion is great. It's less invasive than surgical abortion. It's safe. It's safer than Tylenol, right? So you hear all these mantras that they're saying, but let's actually walk through the science of what's actually happening. So when you hear chemical abortion or abortion pill, they're talking about, it's not the morning after pill. That's very different. We're talking about 2 medications that are taken usually within about 48 hours of each other. The first one is called mifepristone. Okay, so that one, that is going to block the effects of a really important hormone needed in pregnancy called progesterone, that is needed, that is vital for the baby's growth and development. So that abortion pill, that first one, mifepristone, is going to block the activity. It's kind of like a lock and key mechanism. It's going to serve like a false key, okay? It's going to get in the way of progesterone and block it, and it's going to basically starve the baby and kill the baby. The second pill that's going to be taken, called misoprostol, that is going to then induce contractions, and the mother is going to deliver a dead baby inside her home, all alone, away from a physician, in her own, and away from, if she needs any help. So that's basically what happened. We're talking about 2 pills. One starves the baby, kills the baby. The second one then induces contractions, and then the mother delivers inside the dead baby at home. Since it's been approved, this pill was approved in 2000 by the FDA. Over 5 million abortions have occurred by chemical abortion. So it is the response in many respects to what's happened with Dobbs. They see it as a way to chemical abortion is a way to allow easy access. Abortion easy access. It also they're also really pushing to decrease the amount of regulations and oversight so that it can basically go underground. And we also know that those numbers of over 5 million that have occurred are a gross underestimate, because abortion reporting in this country is incredibly flawed. So we know that those numbers are much greater.
So the argument in the courts, basically, from the one court, I think the Fifth Circuit was saying this was rushed by the FDA in 2000, did not go through the rigors of this, and they also are saying it is perfectly safe. We see that over and over and over again, that it's perfectly safe. And I understand that there was a study that came out of Finland and showed that chemical abortions have 4 times the complication rate of surgical abortions they
Right.
reported.
Right.
What are some of those complications that have come about as a result of the abortion pill?
Yeah, and just, I'm glad you brought that up because, as I mentioned, abortion reporting in this country is very flawed. So we have to look at other large international studies to really get that have good record linkage analysis. And like you said, it's over 4 times as dangerous than surgical abortion. And here's what we're seeing. There's a really high complication rates because what's happening is that you can have heavy bleeding. You can have hemorrhage. We're seeing that 15% of these women that take the chemical abortion pill will experience hemorrhage or heavy bleeding. About 7% will need emergency surgery to remove any of the pregnancy tissue that is still retained and was not removed. We're seeing that there's an increase in hospital admissions, infection, blood transfusion. There's been death. And what's really important is that we also know from recent data from the Charlotte Lozier Institute that actually looked at over 500,000 abortions and actually looked and said, okay, well, this is the number of women that had chemical abortions, and let's look at how many of those actually had to go to the ER. We've seen that the number of ER visits since chemical abortion was approved by the FDA has gone up 500%. We're seeing that in 2015, 35% of the women that underwent a chemical abortion, 35% of them had to go to the ER. We see that there's a 53% greater risk of ER visits if you have a chemical abortion compared to a surgical abortion. Right. And not only that, we know that women are being told to lie if they have a complication. That if they end up in the emergency room, lie, tell them that you just are having a miscarriage. And actually, when we analyze that data, that's exactly what we're seeing. We're seeing that over 60% of these ER visits have been miscoded as a miscarriage. And so this is incredibly dangerous for women. Chemical abortion is incredibly dangerous because not only does it put them as a greater risk of severe complications, as even death, but then they're being told to lie about it and cover it up so that even if they end up in the emergency room, they're not treated with the appropriate medical care because they don't have all the facts.
Built on a lie, just like
That's
Roe v.
exactly
Wade was
right.
built on a lie.
Yeah.
And not knowing this, and we were talking about the other countries and having looked at them, I also saw a study in England and Wales, and just to echo some of the things you just talked about, emergency calls reported that between 2019 and 2020, emergency requests for attempted chemical abortions needed follow-up care by 54%, ambulance runs up by 19%. These are stories not being told.
They aren't, and I think we talked about ectopic pregnancy before, and this is a really important, because especially with the FDA chipping away at the important regulations and oversight that's needed. They used to have safeguards in place. Now their goal is to eliminate those safeguards because it provides easier access, right? So, but in doing so now, they have no more now in-person visits that are required. It's all telehealth. Women can receive these pills at their doorstep through the mail. They can even now receive them through the pharmacy. And so what happens when you don't have an in-person visit, that means you don't have an ultrasound. And if you don't have an ultrasound, you can't rule out, you can't diagnose whether that mother has an ectopic pregnancy. And they're not supposed to receive abortion pills if she has an ectopic pregnancy. It's incredibly dangerous for her life. And so they're putting women in these situations that are risky. And so in addition to that, if they don't have an ultrasound, they can't even confirm that the woman's pregnant. They can't confirm that because she's only supposed to be taking this pill up to 10 weeks. They can't confirm that she's actually not at 12 or 15 weeks. We can't confirm that there's not abuse. This is ripe for situations where sex abusers, sex traffickers,
Child sex predators.
We know in the state of Wisconsin, there are cases on record where boyfriends have slipped these drugs into their girlfriend's drink. We know that this is asking for trouble. This is asking for trouble in the state if we don't stand up and try to do something about it.
And the nation as a whole.
And the nation as a whole.
So we understand that the cases are going to make their way up to the U.S. Supreme Court, and probably sooner than later.
Right.
It's troubling. I know Justice Alito really wanted to put the brakes on this immediately here.
Yeah. I think it's really important. I just want to list very quickly what their claims are. And they are absolutely appropriate what they claimed. The Alliance for Hippocratic Medicine is a group of doctors that are led by AHM to sue the FDA because they're claiming that the FDA illegally approved chemical abortion drugs in 2000, that they failed to meet its own legal obligations to protect girls and women. They neglected to determine whether it was safe in the pediatric population. These drugs are routinely offered to young girls, adolescent girls, and they never did any studies on them, right? They're ignoring evidence of these severe complications that we just talked about, and they're eliminating necessary safeguards. Like we said, they've been chipping away at this over the years, that they are increasing access, decreasing regulation, decreasing oversight, ignoring the risks, and this is putting women and girls at severe risk, not to mention the baby that is being killed in the process.
And that's something you mentioned earlier, Doctor, is the fact that lives have been taken by this. And you're talking about the life of the mother.
Right. That's exactly right. So it's like, the goal in our state should be to protect. In the nation should be to protect all citizens, unborn and born. Right? We go through incredible odds to save the unborn child when that child is wanted. I've seen these scientific advancements, like fetal surgery, like we talked about, as early as 15 weeks. But then once the mother decides that she doesn't want this child, then somehow we're like, oh, okay, that's not a real human being. It's okay to just kill that child. And so our goal should be to try to protect all lives in this nation, whether unborn or born, not to kill the ones we don't want, and then to ignore severe complications and health complications and mental, not only physical, but mental health complications for these women that are going to happen.
I find it also interesting, ironic really, that the FDA is arguing that reversing this pill would harm hundreds of individuals, hundreds of thousands of women. Here's a statement that they've made in their argument. This is a statement to the U.S. District Judge, Matthew Kaczmarek. And they said this: the public interest would be dramatically harmed by effectively withdrawing from the marketplace a safe and effective drug that has lawfully been on the market for 22 years. It's remarkable that they would say that. We know it's not a safe drug.
Yeah.
If your intention is to take life, I guess it's effective in taking life, as well as perhaps 2 lives from those taking it.
Yeah.
But when we are seeking, we didn't see and this is another whole issue, but we didn't see that kind of argument about ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine or so forth during COVID.
Right. Yeah, in this case, I mean, they're literally ignoring the science and all the complications. And I think, they will point, the New York Times came out and they said, yeah, but look at these 100 reports, that show that it's safe like Tylenol. Okay, well, let's look at one of those reports. When they start saying it's safe like Tylenol, I want to point out that they pointed to a study where they looked at overdoses of Tylenol. So they compared chemical abortion to people that overdosed on Tylenol. You can't say that it's the same as Tylenol if you're looking at an overdose situation. And then they didn't even provide all of the information regarding those studies that they pointed to. And I also want to point out that many of the studies that they point to, these are based on voluntary reporting. They are smaller studies that have a high loss to follow-up when we look at the number of cases. We really have to go back to these large international studies, or the ones like the Charlotte Lozier did, looking at over 500,000 Medicaid population, where you can directly compare what happened when a woman took chemical abortion and what was the direct effect. And that's the data that they are literally they're ignoring.
I want to make sure we get out information about your websites where people can get more information on these issues.
So we really encourage you to go to Lozier Institute, LOZIER Institute.org, and there you can find all the information, and voyageoflife.com. And I just want to mention really quick, abortion pill reversal. Many women experience regret after taking the first pill. Okay, and we know that there is a simple but effective way to try to save that baby. We know that if you can flood the mother's body with progesterone, that to outcompete that abortion pill, that has saved over 4,000 babies.
And this is a story not being told. Again, it's built up, in my opinion, built upon the lies and deception. We don't want women to know that that there's a reversal mechanism in place.
There is a reversal, and it's very simple and effective. It's saved over 4,000 babies. There have been no severe adverse drug reactions that have been reported. there is a 24/7 hotline for any woman that regrets that she's taken an abortion pill. She can go to abortionpillreversal.com. She will then talk to somebody that will put her in touch with rapid caring help by a trained medical professional that is closest to her, that will help her to get the help that she needs. But she has to act immediately after she has taken that first pill in order to try to help reverse the effects. And it makes sense. Scientifically, it makes sense why this works. The baby needs progesterone to live. They're trying to block that. You just basically try to outcompete it with more of the good stuff, to try to get rid of that, like we said, get rid of that false key that wants to do harm to that baby.
Sure.
It's a very simple mechanism, and it is saving lives every day.
Again, you said it's abortionpillreversal.com.
That's right.
Yeah, for more information on it. And sadly, right now, we have the Canadian Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, who is basically saying if the Supreme Court will stop this, if America stops this, we will be glad to supply American women with the abortion pill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we see like even with the AHM, the Alliance for Hippocratic Medicine case that sued the FDA, states were stockpiling chemical abortion. Washington and California were on record saying, well, we're going to stockpile all this chemical abortion. And yeah, now we have Canada saying that they're going to help us. I mean, it's completely ignoring just the humanity of the unborn child here and the health of women. They can tout that all that they want, but this is only going to bring harm to this nation if people don't stand up and start to see the facts for what they really are, and they just need to. I mean, this is no different. They're standing up and doing no different than like what the Biden-Harris administration is doing, and just supporting the FDA, saying it's okay that we're just allowing these chemical abortions to flood the market and to kill these children.
Very troubling, folks, and it's my opinion that violence inside the womb begets violence outside the womb as well. And we think of the violence, the lawlessness that's been going on in society, even since the leak of the Dobbs decision came forth. And we saw the carnage of Wisconsin Family Action take place, the firebombing that took place at their offices. We're familiar with what happened. That was on Mother's Day, less than 1 year ago now. And but now, just recently, too, another clinic was just hit. This one is Bowling Green, Ohio. Here you can see some of the graffiti and so forth. Fake clinic, abort God, signed by Jane's Revenge. But this is a pro-life pregnancy center just targeted by abortion. Once again, Jane's Revenge. This, again, violence inside the womb. There's no holes, barred when it comes to bringing violence against organizations that are standing up for life.
And these organizations love women. They meet them where they're at. They give them the help that they need. Not only just the ultrasounds that they need to see the baby's heartbeat in their womb, to see that baby's feet kick and the fingers, and that they are there to walk that woman through that pregnancy and provide whatever help that she needs. There is nothing but love going on in those centers, and the fact that they are being targeted with this violence, I mean, it just, like you said, the violence, it's just violence all around, whether it be inside the womb or outside the womb.
Dr. Sanderly, why did you get engaged with this issue?
Well, I know that the Holy Spirit just placed it on my heart, that He, God just called me to do it. But I think there's been many reasons. My journey has consisted in, trying to get pregnant many times, and for reasons that I don't completely understand. We were blessed with one child, but we lost many to miscarriage.
Sorry.
Thank you. And so we went through that journey, and I just know that God placed it on my heart, because once I saw just the incredible pain that I felt when I lost those children, and then the incredible joy when my son was born, and seeing him inside my womb, and looking back at that same face, the same nose that I saw inside my womb on the ultrasound, the same heartbeat, and then God just really placed it on my heart that it was time. It was time to stop using my science to benefit myself, and to use what He had gifted me with to help be a voice for the unborn, to be a voice for the voiceless, and to help educate others on what really is going on, what is the truth, and to just really reveal the the truth and the wonder and the awe of God's creation in each one of these precious little ones.
I know also just the importance of this issue, and many watching right now wonder, what can I do? I'm just one individual. How can I make a difference?
Yeah. I think pray. I think prayer is just so important right now, to just pray what God is leading you to do. Because I think he's leading everybody to do different things. But I think first and foremost, it's really, watching this show is a really good first step to get educated on the issues, to really hear the truth, so that when you hear the talking points from the other side, you don't just automatically just assume that that's the truth, that you really take time to educate yourself on the issues, to really hear that these are unborn lives. These are unborn lives at stake. These are real human beings, and that abortion kills the life of an innocent child every single time, no matter when it happens inside the womb. And so I encourage people to speak up, to not be afraid, and to really be a voice for the unborn, because if we aren't, nobody is going to be.
Yeah, indeed. And friends, just a reminder, usually within a day, half a day, this program is posted up on our website. You can take a link to this program, send it out to others in your social media post. We put it up at vcy.tv as well, and it's there for a long, long time to stay informed on these critical issues. And we don't have to live in ignorance on this issue. I mean, the science is out there, and it shows for us. And again, through your websites, too, you've got a lot of great information that our viewers can see.
Yeah, there's a lot of information there. I encourage you to use the website. That's what it's there for. We want to help educate the public, policymakers, just so that they understand the science, and to really promote the dignity and the value of every life from conception up until birth. And of course, reach out to us if you have questions. We're happy to help.
And one other note here too, you have to stay abreast what's happening within our state. For instance, we have seen where, yes, even Republican lawmakers are coming forth right now to carve out a new piece of legislation to expand exceptions, so that when we're going to allow abortion to take place, it's Assembly Bill 175.
Right, yeah, and I think, one thing I failed to mention earlier when we were talking about the number of abortions in the state, when I went back and looked at our data, when we looked at the abortions, in addition to all the abortions that were taking place before Dobbs, there was nearly 600 cases reported of complications of women that underwent an abortion. So there was uterine perforation, infection, hemorrhage. So I think, remember that abortion, yes, it's killing the life of an innocent unborn child, but there are significant physical and mental health issues every time a woman undergoes an abortion that we need to be aware of, and we need to share those facts.
Dr. Sender-Lee, thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Dr. Tara Sender-Lee with us here this evening on the inFocus program. A reminder, our program was pre-recorded in order to address important issues here that are facing us this very week. Keep in mind, legislation is being introduced to expand abortion in our state. Reach out to your state legislators. Let them know your position on these issues. In just a couple of weeks, we'll have Jelaine Appling back with us from Wisconsin Family Council. We'll be looking more specifically at that legislation as well. But friends, indeed, we are knit together in our mother's womb. God is the author of life, and as we are encouraged in Scripture to choose life. God bless you, folks. Thanks for joining us on inFocus. Good night.